short items, I think, right? Some of the people that were going to speak on the issue of pickleball were asking if we could move things up, but I think we said it's a pretty short agenda.
We do have a consultant.
Yeah, perfect.
That's one of the reasons on this flip that we have
Okay.
a consultant.
Got it. You can just give me an eye if we need to move it further down if they're not here yet. Yeah.
They're not here.
You'll just go for it. Okay, perfect. Okay, yeah, no worries. All right. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the January meeting of the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission. Once again, I want to thank all the members of the public who have come out to be a part of tonight's meeting. And if you want to come in, feel free and find a seat. And if you're watching us at home, thank you for joining that way as well. The first order of business for tonight's meeting is to approve the minutes from the December 12th meeting. So I want to give the commissioners a moment to take a look at that and see if there's anything they want to comment on related to those notes. I had a comment, which is just, I'm not sure that all of the comments around the basketball were reflected here. And in particular, because we brought it up as a future agenda item, I thought it should be reflected somewhere on the minutes for that meeting. So if others concur or if there's a difference of opinion, I'm happy to sort of engage that. But I just wanted to make sure that that was reflected since that was a large portion of the time in the last meeting.
There are action minutes, so usually public comments do not appear on in the minutes, but they appear in the recording of the meeting.
But in terms of the future agenda item, since we identified it as something we were going to talk about at this meeting,
yes.
Yes, maybe we could just add it there. That'd be great. Any other comments or any motions around the minutes?
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Everyone in favor? All right. So on to the next order of business, which is the open public comment period. So just to clarify for people who are in the audience, this is a period to make a public comment about something that is not on tonight's agenda. If you want to comment on something that's on tonight's agenda, there'll be an opportunity with each agenda item. So this is an open comment period for members of the public to comment on something not included in the agenda. And if you're interested in doing that, please feel free to step up to the podium.
I do have a few comment cards for 2 of them, and if there are others, I invite you all to fill out a comment card for public comments right now or for any other items on the agenda. But for now, I would like to invite Patrice, Amy, okay. And there's also Larry Lynch.
So I've been living in Albany for more than 40 years. Albany is distinguished by one property aside from its excellent school system. It's Albany Hill Park. This is a park which has many endangered species of insects, of plants, and birds. A lot of birds, migratory birds, are getting confused. They sometimes go from the east to the west. This is well known among bird specialists. They fly, they meet the ocean, they think, well, there is trouble here, there is no land. They come back on Albany Hill. That's why many bird watchers frequent Albany Hills and look at these special birds. You have birds even who got lost from the East Coast, which end up on Albany Hill. Right now, basically, half of Albany Hill is slated for destruction. Okay? You have all the trees have been spiked, have been marked with orange markers, sometimes several of them. And this is very surprising because people like me, a lot of Albany citizens, long-term residents, paid a lot of money to contribute to a fund which was supposed to save Albany Hill. Now, we're told by the mayor, I was told, there was only 5 million was gathered, only 5 million. Okay, what did they do with this 5 million? With this 5 million, they could have bought half of the 11 acres parcel, which is slated for development right now. Now, this is a crying shame. You have vagrants all over California. A second roadway has been built at the top of Albany Hill. There was already a roadway. Then, for some reason, it was determined that people with wheelchairs could not go on this roadway, which was completely false. I've been going on this roadway for 40 years. A second roadway, which was paved, was built parallel to the existing roadway, which is like 25 feet wide already. Many trees were destroyed, and now you have vagrants, homeless, and drug dealers on top of the hill. I go on top of the hill several times a week. I was proposed drugs on top of the hill several times for the first time in 40 years. I was really shocked, but it's because now it's an attractive place, so there is asphalt, so they're attracted. And so I really wonder what's the idea. You have a homeless crisis in California, you have to buy affordable housing, you have to build high rises, which apparently Albany is not doing, and now you want to build multi-million-dollar homes all over Albany Hill, because obviously they are going to be multi-million-dollar homes, because this is the most beautiful view of the entire Bay Area, from Santa Rosa to Monterey. Okay, so what is going on? And what happened to the $5 million?
Thank you. And just to clarify, on the open public comment, because it's not agendized, we are not able to respond, but I do want to let you know that we listen fully and intently to all of the comments, and it allows us to sort of consider it for a future meeting when it would be publicly posted. So I do appreciate everyone being here to make their comments.
Hey, my name is Larry Lynch. We've lived at Gateview Apartments since 2007, and we just became aware a couple of weeks ago about the proposed development on Albany Hill in this 11-acre parcel that's owned by some folks in San Francisco, I guess. They're from Hong Kong originally, maybe. There's some connection with Hong Kong in any case. And we've gotten some response from the city manager about this, but apparently there are trees being cut down on the hill without a permit. And because we were told there was no application for a permit, and trees cannot be cut down on that parcel without a permit. So the question is this happening? And if there has been a permit granted, then I think we should know about it. If there hasn't, what's going to be done to keep this from happening? Apparently there's some rare conifers on the tree, not the eucalyptus, some other trees that have already been cut down. I walked up the hill in that pathway that's kind of in the center of that parcel, or maybe a little bit to the left, and I saw numerous trees marked with orange slashes on it. We were told by the city manager that this was to mark the boundary, but it's just on that path. So I don't see how that's marking any limits of the boundary. If so, why is it scattered all over the path and further back? These are old trees, young trees, all kinds of trees. So the question is, what is going on? We were told that there has been no application for a permit to develop the hillside. But we want to know, has there or has there not been an application for a permit to develop it? There is a plan out there already that from a developer that shows actually the extension of the existing development further to the south there, that it just continues a couple of loops. It would basically take out the whole side of the hillside. And it's for townhouses, apparently. It says this is not the actual plan necessarily, but it's a possible plan. So the community really needs to know what is going on, and if this commission is aware of development plans, at least Gateview and probably Bayside and Bridgewater would really like to know about it as well. So basically, and I echo Patrice's question about the money that was allocated. Why didn't, apparently it was for sale, this whole parcel, and why was none of the money used, the $5 million or $10 million or whatever it was, to purchase part of it? So it is a bird sanctuary. It's beautiful, and if it's all taken out, it's going to destroy the habitat and going to destroy the whole look of the place.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other public comments about items that are not on the agenda?
No. we don't. But I wanted to let the commission know that there is a series of FAQs on the city website regarding Albany Hill. The commission and the public are invited to go to the city website and under city news, Albany Hill info, and there's information. And as far as the development on the hill, people are encouraged to contact Jeff Bond, the Community Development Director, directly. And there should be also a special planning and zoning meeting at the end of the month regarding development on the hill.
Thank you.
Jeff Bond, B-O-N-D.
So at this time, we will turn to announcements from either staff members or commission members. Isabel, do you have any announcements you want to share?
Yes, I do. Wanted to let you know that there is a sandbag filling day assistance on this Saturday at Ocean View, and also which between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. And we have volunteers available to help residents fill out sandbags and for the purpose of the rains. The Friends of Albany Park will also be hosting a cleanup of the Cordonesis Creek as part of the MLK Giving Back to the Community event, and that's on the 18th of January at 9 a.m. And there is also a Be Curious presented at the community center by our very own Commissioner Sardinas, and that is on January 24th. And on the 28th of January, there will be a clothing swap at the community center. And finally, we are gearing up for our Chinese New Year celebration on February 6th.
Wonderful. And do we have any announcements from members of the commission?
Can I plug my talk? So I got a PhD from UC Berkeley and studied native bees, and so I am going to be, the talk is Be Curious, everything you ever wanted to know about bees but were afraid to ask. So I am going to demystifize them and hopefully help people understand that species a lot better.
Thank you for your
Going to be on the e-newsletter or the city website? Hope so. Wait. Okay. I'll get the
Yes,
information from you.
usually all of the Recreation Department's events get into the e-news.
Great.
Any other commissioner announcements? All right. So our next, we don't have any presentations this evening. So we have 2 tree items. We're actually going to flip them around this evening, just in the interest of some of the speakers that are involved. The first one is going to be item 6.2, which is the urban forester initiated tree removals.
All right, thank you. If you recall, the last meeting, we proposed having a new approach to how we're going to review trees, tree removals, and this is our first meeting where we're implementing this new process. And instead of removing or looking at tree removals at every meeting, we're proposing to do it on a quarterly basis. So we'll be doing them in January, April, July, and October. The idea is to group them and be more focused in how we do them, and hopefully more efficient in how we're reviewing and making our decisions. And then within the meeting, we want to group them into 2 different buckets. One bucket that we're going to do, this is item 6.2, would be forester-initiated tree removals. So the intent, I look at this as sort of the dead and dying list. So John, as he does his work, is going to be compiling a list of trees that are really at their end or have some other really significant issue that requires removal. So my hope is that this becomes a very straightforward analysis and almost becomes something like a consent calendar item. So obviously that'll take some time so that everyone understands the scope of the information that we'll be including in the list and the type of trees. And once maybe we get comfortable with it, it can move to a bit of a consent item thing. And then the second bucket would be either public-initiated ones, tree removals, or maybe a forester-initiated one, but something with a little more complicated.
My apologies. Do you mind shutting the door? It's just we pick up a lot of ambient noise outside in the lobby. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure, I'll speak a little louder, too. The intent is that these require a higher level of analysis, maybe more discussion, and like we've done in this case, we will likely hire an outside arborist to do a report, so we're working off of a really strong basis to make our decisions. So with that, I want to jump into the first two tree removals. And of course, we have John here today to answer questions, and we have our consulting arborist on the way. Right? Oh, he is. Oh, there he is. So he's available here for questions as well. So let's get into it. Our first one is is located at 631 Carmel. It's a purple leaf plum. This is right across from Memorial Park. As you see in the pictures here, and if you drive by, it's really, if it's not dead, it's dying. We think it's a pretty clear removal under our criteria. Again, we can come back and talk on these if we want, but I just want to run through them, and then we can go back and answer questions. The next one is on 943 Solano, and this is a Brisbane box. This one is a little bit of a different issue. The main issue is it has a fairly significant lean going across the sidewalk, and this has been on John's radar for a couple of years now. He's tried to do some corrective work. It inhibits the right-of-way, the pathway through there, so it's just a barrier. Plus, it is in decline, and so again, we think this really qualifies for fairly easily as a removal. So with that, if there are any questions, we have John here, or we can.
Do we have any clarifying questions for the commission for Mark or John? All right, do we have any comments from the public about these two particular trees? Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission. Is there any discussion about these trees, or does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a comment that I like this idea of approaching the city-initiated tree removals more as a consent calendar type item to support a more efficient use of everyone's time. So from my perspective, it's a positive approach.
Great. And this is our first approach on this, so if people have feedback of how it might work better, we're happy to receive feedback.
And then I also wanted to clarify that the quarterly pace, there might be special cases that have economic impact.
So absolutely. Again, if there's an emergency tree removal, we have a process to deal with that, and we'll notify you. If there's something in between that needs more immediate action, there's no set rule that we have to follow quarterly, and if something comes in, we will make an exception.
I guess that kind of answers my question, because I was curious if there might be more emergency tree removal necessitated by this process. Maybe that's something that we could try to keep track of and see if it's a little different doing it this way for a year versus the previous year or something.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I think in my mind we're still struggling with is, when's the cutoff of if one comes in at the beginning of December, is that enough time to get it on the agenda versus, when does that come in? And so, maybe this evolves into every other month instead of quarterly. I don't know. We're open to the discussion, but this was our first approach with it.
I will say that I took a look at both these trees, and it seemed pretty clear to me, so I'm going to move that we approve the application.
Second. Everyone in favor? All right, that passes. So we'll move on to the second tree and, or the second item, which is item 6.1, the two liquid amber removals at 509 Pomona.
Yes, so this was a tree removal that was initiated by the property owners at 509. They came to us after a windstorm in late October, and then actually they have 2 liquid ambers in front of their property, but the adjacent property had 2 liquid ambers as well, and one of them dropped a limb, same vintage, same size, dropped a limb and destroyed their car. Through the discussion, we also found that these trees have a history dating back to the late 1990s. They paid a trip and fall claim. They've replaced portions of their sidewalk in front of their house at least 3 times. Based on the request, we engaged Robert Booties here today, who can answer questions about the analysis, to go out and evaluate the trees. Their underlying question was, were these trees safe in front of their house? So we wanted to, one, make sure that and take immediate action if we needed it. And then once we got over that hurdle, we wanted to consider it for removal. Let me get to the analysis here. So the tree on the right, that's the southern tree, and I think it's identified as 923 in the report. The analysis found that that had structural issues in the tree that led to a high risk rating. Is that all right? I'm not a forester, so I want to make sure I get things right. Then there was an overall assessment that these trees are not suited for this site. They've essentially outgrown the strip here. Although the tree on the north side, that's the 923 tree, is structurally in good condition, it's still too big for the site, and there's documented damage to the roadway, the gutter, the sidewalks, even with the new replacements. The combination of all of this led us to a conclusion for removal under a number of our criteria, including, physical condition and an unacceptable risk, damage to the sidewalks, previous repairs. There's a whole pick list of what we think would qualify. During the discussion here, I found out from John that there was a 4th tree on the property. So the tree that dropped the limb we removed in October at an emergency removal, but the tree that was just north of that on the 901 property was removed a couple of years ago during a sidewalk repair because the extent of root damage or root pruning would damage the structural integrity of the tree. And I think one of the conclusions of the arborist here was that same level of damage to these roots would be required or would be triggered if we went and fixed all the impacts to the infrastructure. And just on a public works side of things, this is one of the areas where we get a lot of complaints because the trees have pushed up the pavement in so many places. So it would be a pretty severe impact to the trees if we went and replaced it or fixed all the damage. So that led us to the recommendation for removal.
Do we have any clarifying questions before we invite up comments?
So once these trees are removed, will the property owners be responsible for fixing the sidewalk, or is that included in what gets repaired when the replanting happens?
So we do have the sidewalk program that they can get included in. The good part is their latest repair was done in October of this year. So just a note, if, I know Albany has some significant sidewalk issues. If everyone managed their sidewalks like this homeowner, we'd be in a substantially different position. They've really taken a proactive approach to participate in city programs and replace things on their own nickel when there are issues.
So the part of the issue is that the roots were pruned during this recent sidewalk repair, but currently the sidewalk is in a satisfactory state.
So there are sections, so I don't know if the extent of the root pruning during this latest repair, but there are sections that are in good condition and there are still sections that have smaller uplifts.
I apologize, I just bit into a granola bar. Are there any other clarifying questions? I'd like to invite any members of the public that would like to comment on this topic to the podium. And I will mention that the homeowners submitted a letter which is included in tonight's agenda packet because I believe they're out of town waiting their grandbaby's birth in the East Coast. Although maybe they're in town, so I shouldn't announce that in a meeting. In any event,
Too late.
also I wanted to see if there are any additional comments that our consultant had or wanted to make to supplement what Mark has shared. And if so, please step up to the podium.
Yes, the tree that would be on right is the most hazardous structurally at this time. The one on the left, 922, is structurally sound. But when all these repairs are made, as brought out, that situation will change completely. We don't know how many roots will have to be removed in order to make the repairs properly. And those repairs would be the sidewalk area and also in the street. So that's very important to know that. I do use ground penetrating radar. I can map routes through the street, on the sidewalk. I can go inside houses, tell you how many routes they are, map them out. So that's something that you might consider in the future. But for now, I think that if you're going to make these repairs, now 923, some repairs were made about a 4-foot section of the sidewalk. We don't know how many roots were removed from there. So that even enhances this tree as being problematic in the aspect of risk.
Do any members of the commission have questions for our consultant?
Yeah, I guess 923 has some structural, it's clear as structural damage. I'm curious if the past root trimming caused that damage. I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter. But for 922, the one you say has good structure, I'm still not clear exactly why the recommendation is to move it if you feel like it's not a hazard.
I'm assuming that somewhere the homeowner is going to make the repairs to the sidewalk because of potential trip hazards and liability. When that takes place, that will change the risk of this tree. And so that will take place. There will be a point in time when that'll happen, hopefully soon before somebody gets hurt. And so that's why I'm recommending that both trees be removed at this time so that that can facilitate an improvement to the property. And
I guess I'm just not
It's
clear
risk.
if that would be, I mean, we're not going to go in and, are you saying that you're going to go in and repair that sidewalk
So
right now?
It's not just the sidewalk, it's the pavement itself. And so.
Oh, was that in the queue, though, for?
We have a project that we want to go and do pothole repair throughout the city, and this is on the list because the roots have
I see.
have so far damaged the
Oh, okay. I didn't get that
roadways
part.
here. So
Okay.
we would be taking out large
Got it.
large roots.
Okay,
for
so it's
that
already
work.
planned, it's the planned, okay.
So, I didn't see any damage at 922. All the damage is at 923. There's a very minor sidewalk lift at 922, but all of the impact on the street and the curb, it's 923. 922 looks fine. Now, is it the case that well, I was there. I got pictures, and I mean, I don't have ground penetrating radar. But
I did document 922.
But, well, here's my question. Would the removal of 923 impact 922? They're quite close together, so I figured that there's probably some intertwining of the roots going on or something.
In my opinion, that depends on what happens to 922 in the future.
I don't, and the other thing I would say is that we have often said with a tree that is in otherwise decent condition that, well, let's remove the side, when the repair is done, when they remove the sidewalk and evaluate then. It may not be the case So to preemptively remove it, anticipating that it would be when we don't know, when we can just wait, seems like an option here.
Right, these are just my observations.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I'm coming from the perspective of we don't have as many huge trees as we would like in this city, and on that block in particular, it would.
Especially this variety.
So if we can save something, then it's a good idea.
My only caution, having looked at it just recently, was I really feel for the homeowners who have already repaired the sidewalk and shared in cost and paid in total in cost, and it sounds like had liability lawsuits around people tripping. That's a lot to take on, and I feel like if it's their preference and if it's the guidance of a sort of tree consultant that these pose some risk or that there's potential continuing issue, I have a lot of sympathy for people's pocketbooks, and So my general leaning would be definitely the sort of the very problematic trees is kind of a non-issue, but the 922 just seems like that allows them to sort of maybe get some trees that are better scale for their sidewalk, so it won't continue to happen every few years. The question I have, though, and one of the reasons I think this has come up in the commission, is like this homeowner tree education. Like, what are the kinds of trees that people can plant in this size planting strip that are not going to cause this problem? Is it just because of the scale that these have gotten to be so tall that we're seeing this over and over and over? Or do we feel confident that they could be advised of trees that would not continue to cause this kind of problem? Because I think any homeowner would be concerned about just always having to fork over money for sidewalks.
It's frustrating to.
And driveways and.
Something.
Yeah.
Because life in general is expensive, and we don't need any extra problems. But these trees were really a poor choice from the beginning. And when I was on the street, I noticed that these were the only two left. I don't know, well, there was one next door. That totaled out their car. And so most cities do have a list of trees that the homeowner can choose from that has proven to be less invasive with their root systems. And there's other things you can do to even help trees establish their root systems more efficiently, like using structural soil when you in the planting pit. That's proven by Cornell University as being an optimal way of helping trees establish their root system not as close to the surface as you normally do. But liquid amber trees will do it anyway. That's why they were a poor choice many years ago. So.
I see in the report it says the trees will be replaced with a similarly sized tree from the city's approved tree list, but it also sounds like you're saying these trees are actually too big for their spot. So can someone clarify what it means to have a similarly sized tree?
So my sense is we're not going to plant. We're going to plant a tree that's kind of it grows and has sort of the same effect, but same scale, but more suited for this size. It might be incrementally smaller, but we're not looking at putting a really small tree. So we'd go through a process to find a tree that fits, that's on our list, that fits for this location.
PG&E puts out a list of trees that are agreeable with their power lines. In other words, they don't grow into the power lines like other trees would. So that might be something to research if you don't have a list. To find out which trees would be agreeable for this small site, because we're talking about a sidewalk and a curb. So there's quite a few choices, but it'd be good to have a list so that you can let the homeowner look at it.
We do have a list.
Yeah, we do have a street tree list, but I think there are a lot of things on it, and so it's not always clear as a homeowner exactly what would fit in that planting strip. And I know we can get advice about that when it, but I just.
The list is listed by planting strip size.
I feel like we had some discussion where there were things that had been listed as like safe, and then there were people coming forward with those kind of trees having problems with their sidewalks. So there was some concern that maybe a sub part of that list, I may be misremembering, but
Any tree will lift a sidewalk in a given situation. I mean, it's.
Again, I think having a master street tree plan will help us deal with a lot of these decisions. But I feel like I've heard enough and would like to do a motion unless we need to have more. Okay, well, I motion that we approve the recommendation to remove these trees and both trees.
do we have a second?
I just want to say I oppose for precedent. So I feel like it's a little expedient to do the 922. I mean, I understand why, and but I just feel like whatever we can just to save a bigger tree like this, I would support. And so in this case, I'm planning to oppose. I agree with the 923. I don't agree with the 922, just for the record.
So we have a motion on the floor to approve the recommended removal of both trees. Do we have a second for that?
I think you already did, didn't you?
Nobody seconded it because Julia was making a separate comment. There's not a second for that motion. I'll second it, so then we can bring it to a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? So that motion does not carry. Do we want to have a second motion that follows in line with what Julia was suggesting, which is a motion to approve the removal for 923?
I'll make the motion to approve the removal for 923, but not for 922.
Do we have a second?
Well, do we want to say something like, and then 922 would be evaluated at the time that the sidewalk is repaired for possible removal?
Are you comfortable with amending the motion?
I think that's fair.
Because that's what we've often done.
Sure. Yep.
And do we have a second for that motion?
Was that clear?
The motion is to remove 923 and then to reevaluate 922 when the sidewalk is repaired.
Correct.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
And I want to pause for a moment because if there's a public comment on these particular trees and we didn't hear the rest of the comments, I want to give people an opportunity to come up and say something. Do you have a comment about these two trees?
Yes, I do.
Then you can go to the podium. My apologies. Because of the consultant, we got confused there.
Oh, right.
Okay, as I said, I've been living here for 4 decades, more than 4 decades actually. And I'm extremely struck by the fact that if you go on any hill, you go on BART or whatever, there are few trees in Albany. There are much more trees in Berkeley. Somehow, it's a completely different continent, Berkeley. You tend to cut trees in Albany. Now, I had problems in the Gateview area, and I found out that several times perfectly healthy trees were removed on our property, and the whole cycle of removing the trees and planting a new trees cost $4,000 to our homeowners association. So I discovered, and we had a problem recently, there was a tree which needed to be pruned. I've pruned, directed the pruning of more than 30 trees on the Gateview property. And recently there was a tree I wanted to have pruned for like $400. I was blocked and people said, no, you have to remove the tree and plant a new one, an oak. And all oaks are dying right now. Everybody knows that because of climate change. And I discovered that the bill would be like $4,000 to $5,000. So I started to understand that there is a kind of virtuous loops between people who want to remove trees and replace them by new trees, particularly in Albany. Berkeley is obviously not as affected because there are more trees in Berkeley. Now, there are trees in many cities all around the world. Somehow they don't have as much of a root problem. One thing you can do with a tree is trim it. You don't need to cut it. You don't need to poison the roots, plant another tree. You can trim the tree. That's the way it's done in Europe on a massive scale. You can go to London, you can go to Paris, you can go in 1,000 of European cities. That's how it happens. I wonder why it does not happen here. Another argument which should not be used is that there are power lines and that the trees are in power lines. The power lines should be removed. Everything should be buried because everybody knows that a fire captain died in the Oakland fire because the wires got on the ground and he got shocked going on the street. If you have a quake on the Hayward Fault, which is like a mile and a half away, you are going to have all these power lines down and a lot of people are going to be electrocuted. So since trees are supposed to be here for centuries, especially a beautiful tree like that, the argument that the tree is inside the power lines and therefore the tree should be removed because of power line is a silly argument. The power lines should be removed. So I think Albany needs to change its tree policy. It's a city which has much less trees than any other place. You can go to Palo Alto, I know very well, places like that, there are much more trees than here. Somehow, they don't have the same problem as we do in Albany. We cut, we cut, we cut. There used to be a lot of magnificent trees on Solano which were cut in the past for whichever reason. New trees were planted. And as I said, it's big business. So I have a problem here. And I think the city needs to change its mood because a city with pretty trees is, it's ecologically correct. And also another thing is that for climate change, the only weapon we have right now is big trees. Big trees absorb more CO2 than anything else, okay? So you want to think about that before, cutting more trees and replacing them by very small trees and making the fortune of arborists.
Thank you very much. I want to give an opportunity if anybody else in the audience wanted to comment on these two trees, this would be your opportunity to do so. Okay. Then we're going to bring it back to the commission. And I want to just give you an opportunity if you want to keep the motion that you had or if there's any other discussion or comment that people want to make before we do that.
Can I just respond? So the City of Albany has their climate adaptation and action plan. I'm not sure I'm getting the acronym right. But in it, it discusses carbon sequestration in trees, and that will be something that comes to our commission and generally for the City of Albany to address this tree issue, because I think a lot of us numerous times have brought up that we need to have a better plan for how to replace trees, how to prune trees, and how to plant more trees. And so I think that that's something that will be coming up. That said, I will say I've been on the commission for a little over a year and a half, and liquid ambers are the tree that come to us the most in terms of having caused damage to property or to sidewalks. It's something that we've removed from our approved tree list, and that is something that I personally believe we should be phasing out and have as part of our plan a way to phase these trees out and plant something that's much more appropriate to the climate and to the specific planting boxes that exist. So I want to acknowledge, I completely agree with what you said, but I do think that in terms of these trees, while they do provide a lot of structure, I do think that they are a hazard to the community.
And I just want to, I appreciate that, and I know that the work that you do is very much based on climate adaptation. And I also want to appreciate the comments that were made, because I know that Berkeley actually handles liquid ambers differently, and they actually do trim to try to prevent the safety hazards. And then they repair sidewalks. So it is a political will issue too. And so I just want to make that statement, because I know they're a problem, but there's other ways to handle them. So. And I don't really have a change to the comment, although I just want to say that even though we're saying, let's just look at when the time comes to open up that sidewalk, I feel like that kind of is a pass, anything can happen and we're not involved. It's just in that moment, oh, these routes are bad, so we're just going to cut it out. So I just want to really sort of recognize or sort of hope that there's still careful attention paid at that moment where the assessment's being made as to whether or not the trees gets removed, because we tend to not see that back here. It's just a call in that moment from the arborist. So that's the only point I'd make about the second part of that motion.
Could you repeat the motion as amended?
So the first motion is to approve the removal of tree number 923, but to not approve the removal of 922. Wait until the sidewalk repair at the 922 location happens to further assess whether or not that tree gets removed at that time.
And so under this motion as amended, if the city staff determines that the tree needs to be removed upon further investigation as part of the repair of the sidewalk in the street, does that need to come back to us, or is that a determination that can be made by staff at the time?
I think we're giving them, by making the motion this way, we're relying on their opinion at that moment. It won't come back to us.
So maybe the way we need to word this is that we're actually approving the permit for 922 contingent upon the determination of staff that the removal is necessary as part of the street and sidewalk repairs. Because otherwise,
Sure.
the permit's not approved, and I'm not sure they could remove it.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to restate what I heard, which is that the commission has a motion in front of it to approve the removal of tree number 923 and to approve the removal of 922 contingent upon it being ruled a necessity by staff at the time of the sidewalk and street repair. Did that summarize the motion?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Okay, that passes. As stated, there's a recording. Okay, so now we'll move on to item 6.3, which is related to our, it's related to the comments that were made in the open comment section at the last meeting around the removal of the basketball hoops. And I think Isabel has a presentation on that topic.
And while she's getting ready, I had a quick question for Mark. Do you know, those trees were numbered, and I've never seen that before. Is that part of a tree census that's happening, or is that something else?
No, that was just a numbering convention that our arborist did to include in his report. I don't know if you recall when we did the tree surveys at Memorial Park and Terrace Park, the arborist that did that also went out and tagged numbers. So to the extent that we have numbers at parks, we're probably going to use them going forward, but if they don't have tags, the arborist will put a tag on it.
Okay, so as mentioned by Chair Patterson, at the last meeting of the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission, some concerned residents came forward to discuss the removal of the basketball hoops near the Albany pool and Memorial Park. The basketball hoops were removed by the Albany Unified School District due to the construction of schools and to accommodate the installation of portables in the area. Attached to the staff report, I included a map of the area, and I'll go over it after this. But basically, the area in question is mostly school property. And the red rectangle on the map right here, this whole area, shows the area that is city property that will be leased by the school district for the installation of the portables. And this line right here is the property line. And it's basically 10 feet away from the tennis courts. And just to show you how it looked before on Google Maps. So you'll see that on Google Maps that the basketball hoops were right here in a row, and that they were not on city property, but basically further out onto school district property. And it is our standpoint that since the hoops were removed by the school district, that they would be responsible for mitigating the loss of the hoops, and that the city manager has given notice to the superintendent of schools, letting him know that this is an issue of concern that was brought up to the commission and was also on your agenda this evening. And if the commission did decide that you wanted to do something about this, we are recommending that the commission considers writing a letter for the council's consideration, asking the school district to find a solution to mitigate this issue. If you wanted to further do research and investigate potential options, then I have included an amendment to your work plan would have to be requested by the council, and I provided to you the request form, and what you would need to do is for the commission to designate somebody to fill out the form and send it to me, and I would forward it to council, and it would be placed on an future agenda item.
So just to clarify, if we want to do anything other than just write a letter to the school board, we need to fill out this form.
Right.
And the other question I have, it's unclear to me exactly how far the 10 feet goes on this view that you have here, but it does seem to me clear that some parks space was agreed to be given to the school district, and yet it never came in front of this body. And I was shocked when I saw that, because I feel like even though there may be larger agreements and that sort of thing, we're supposed to be advising as citizens about the parks. And I was shocked last meeting to hear that the basketball hoops had been taken away. I have frequented them in the past myself, but I also was really surprised when I saw the map and realized that some of that is park land, and that agreement was made without any input from this body, and that doesn't seem appropriate.
I'm just going to show you again the map.
Unless I'm misunderstanding
Yes.
it, but it
So
seems like some of that
The
is.
school district is not placing the portable on parkland, but due to I'm not a planner, but basically due to some required setbacks for buildings, they are obligated to lease some of the park property, but they are not placing the portables on city property.
But in placing the portables there, they are impinging on the ability for people to use some of the facilities of the park. So in my view, as a representative of the community that is supposed to be looking at these issues, I feel that that issue should have come before this body, before that agreement was made, because at the very least, we should be aware that that's happening, because it obviously impacted the community deeply, and it just felt like, did that happen because we didn't have a particular month's meeting, or is that just something, it just raised for me issues around how does that happen, and we've never even heard of that, and then it's already a done deal that for 4 to 7 years, there won't be any basketball there. And I also, so that's, I just want to make sure I was understanding it correctly, because it is something that I had concern about.
Sure.
Yeah, and I just would say that even though they're leasing, I mean, it's pretty clear that they actually are, the portable is actually partly on city property. So just, okay.
Yes, the part that's on the cemented area,
Right.
but not the grass area.
Okay.
Whatever.
Yeah, okay. And then the other thing I'd say is the portables in terms of like city versus school, or not the portables, but the basketball courts themselves, if you measure it out, there is part of the basketball court was on our city property, just in terms of like, not the hoops,
No.
but part of
The
it.
sideline.
Yeah, the sideline, which is part of the court. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that for the commission. But yeah, and I would just echo your concerns too.
Okay, so the court wasn't 100% on school property, some of it was on city property.
Any other clarifying questions about this before we give the public an opportunity to comment? I'm not sure if we have comment cards from folks. I think we might.
I have 3 so far, so if there's anybody else who would like to.
Some people may be
comment.
in the, okay, and there may be some people in the lobby too, but if you're interested, if you filled out a card and you're interested in commenting on this, well, let me just make sure that there are some clarifying questions first, and then we'll come to the
When
audience.
I reviewed the minutes from last month's meeting, this was not on the minutes. So when did this come up?
I raised that at the beginning, so I'm not sure if you were here yet.
I wasn't.
I did ask that this be amended because it was all in the open comment period at the last meeting, and that wasn't reflected here. But it was also decided to be a future agenda item, and it's not reflected there either, so that's getting amended.
Great. I wasn't aware of
Just
this.
to fill you in, Commissioner Sardinius, there was about 15 people, maybe 12 people that showed up. Many of them young kids or 11-year-olds that came up and specifically asked for there to be some option for Memorial Park
Probably go
basketball.
back and watch the meeting.
You just go to the beginning and you see it. Yeah.
Thank you.
And did you have something, Ben?
So the staff report alludes to conversations that the city had with the school district about this? So there have been discussions between city staff and school district staff about this issue?
About the basketball hoop,
Yeah.
just an email exchange, no discussion.
Is there any more that you can say about what the state of the dialogue on this issue?
The message we got back from the superintendent is that he would look into it. But I don't have any further information from the school district at this time.
And just to recognize that, I assume that you weren't necessarily part of this conversation, just to recognize that our being unawares or caught off guard, it was obviously not necessarily under your watch.
Right.
And that, but that is a question, I think, for us, is like, how did this happen?
Sure,
And
sure.
that knowing that it
And I've
wasn't
noted
you,
that,
but just
yes.
for us to get some understanding about it.
Yes, understood.
Also, I would note that there's a agendized meeting that was announced on Monday, the 2x2x2 group, and that's where 2 representatives from the city, 2 representatives from the school district, and 2 representatives from University Village get together and hash out areas and issues where the things overlap. And this is not on that agenda, so it seems like that would have been a really good thing to have. It's the only place that I know where the city and the school district actually sit down at regular times and have publicly noticed meetings. But that might be a place where people want to go and speak off the agenda. It should be something, I think, recommended that it be put on a 2x2x2 agenda.
Any other clarifying questions before we move to the public comment period on this item? All right, so we have several comment cards.
I have 4. So we will start with Lucas Cohen. And if you want to just stand up and against the wall over there, and as I call your name. So Lucas, David, Aaron, Frank, Samara, and Sarah.
Thank you. And if you want to just state your name and just share your comments.
Yeah, I'm Lucas Cohen. I'm a 6th grade student at AMS, and it was really a surprise when they took them down, because every day, me and my friends, or almost every day, me and my friends would go there after school, play basketball, get ready for the basketball season at AMS, and they did it, like, there was no signs or anything, and we had no warning about it, so. And I live on Ramona Avenue, a block away from Memorial, and I would go there at night until it got dark because it was a quick walk home. But now the closest place is at AMS, which there's always sometimes there's like cars trying to do tricks or whatever there, and it's not a safe place to play basketball because there's also, it's also a parking lot. And me and my friends don't normally go there. And so, that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for your comments.
My name is David Frank. I was here last meeting. On Sunday, I also live, I live in Albany, a block away from Memorial Park too. I used to go there every night, and even after it got dark for hours, because there were lights on the courts. On Sunday, I took a petition. Only on Sunday, I went out there for 3 hours. I got 70 signatures for people supporting the basketball courts. It was 70, but then I got more other days, so I went to, I have a cousin who also lives near Memorial Park. He's older. He was here last meeting. His name was Jerome Way. He graduated from the high school. So we went to the high school PTSA meeting, just the 2 of us, and we talked, so there is an announcements period at the end, and we talked about the basketball courts to the principal and student body and many other people that were like high, and they signed our petition. The principal supports putting the basketball courts up. She also said she was going to write us a letter of support. So we wanted to say that, just show that many people are supporting the basketball courts, Memorial Park, and so yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And it would be great if we could maybe find a way to get copies of the name, or I don't know if you have a plan for your petition, but it'd be great for the record to have the information that you've collected, if there's a way for us to share that with others on the commission. Thank you for your work on that.
Okay.
Our next speaker.
Hi, my name's Samara, and I hope at Memorial we get basketball courts, because basketball is really fun and great, and a lot of people, including me, enjoy it.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Aaron Frank. I was here last time also addressing the basketball courts that were removed. I want to say that I think the issue that was brought up about the public process is concerning, because this was done and now we're addressing it afterwards, where it seemed like the public should have had some input, given that those portables did go on city property. And obviously, there were lots of kids here last time that were asking for an option for basketball at Memorial Park. I think the idea of sending a letter to the school district is fine, but it's very clear that they don't have space for a basketball court. Otherwise, they would have put portables there. And so to ask them to mitigate it in some way seems like that's not really addressing what all those kids came out and asked for, which were an option for basketball at Memorial Park. So I would ask that you include that in the work plan and make that something that this commission takes on. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and in a month, my kid will be going to school in one of those portables. And I am very concerned about his play space. And I know that the city and the district haven't always had the best relationship, but I am hopeful that when parents come to a meeting in the near future, all concerned about their kids and their play space and their safety, that the city and the school district will work well together and find a solution.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item before we bring it back to the commission for discussion? I want to thank all of our spokespeople who have provided comment this evening. And I want to open this item up for members of the commission.
I have a question about the recommended letter to the district. The recommendation is for the school district to mitigate the loss of the basketball courts. Did you have something specific in mind as to what that mitigation might be?
No, not at this time. It would really be up to the school district to try to find a solution.
One question I would have is, and something people are also asking the city, if the city can work something out on its own property as well, is I don't have much experience seeing people play on those courts. Does anyone have a sense of if it's mostly full court games with 2 full teams, or are people mostly just kind of shooting hoops around one of the basketball goals? Because if it's mostly the latter, then you can probably just mount a hoop on the side of a building with a concrete pad in front of it, and that would, people could shoot their hoops and play horse, or just play on one hoop. So I was wondering if anybody had any experience with that.
I have played there a number of times, and it was always people shooting, not full court games, but people playing horse and shooting. Other people that have played more frequently in groups of young people might have a different experience, but when I've gone, it's always been separate groups of people at the different hoops. So there were several hoop options, which made it really nice because different groups of people could be kind of congregated and playing just, shooting and, kind of recreational.
Yeah, so that kind of thing you can mount a hoop on the side of a building so long as there's either a school structure or a city structure, so long as there's some place to play around it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not, I agree that we should explore it and think about those creative options. When I've been there, I've seen full court play, and I know that there used to be 4 hoops, so it was really a, scaling and, basically a total destruction of that play. But anyway, so I think even if we did just one, but if you actually look at the site, because I live close by, there's very little space now for anything. And even if you put a basketball court in some of that concrete space, it would just run into the street. You can't even tell from this picture, but it's so crammed in. I don't even know where those kids are going to run around on that concrete space. So I don't know that would be an automatic solution, but I think I would definitely support the work plan amendment to just investigate it further, because I think there's probably something we can come up with.
I would agree in support of the work plan amendment for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that I do feel like we heard from the community that this is something that there's a real interest in, and also because, as I mentioned earlier, I feel uncomfortable with the way that this transpired, and I feel like adding it to the work plan gives us more opportunity to sort of be thoughtful about how to sort of help mitigate it. And I have deep concern that sending a letter to the school board is basically paramount or it's the same as kind of sending something into empty space. I mean, it's fine to express that we think they should do something about it, but if there's nothing for them to do about it, and they are well, we have a lot of basketball hoops at AMS. One thing I heard clearly last meeting was that the people playing on these courts either don't feel comfortable, there's a safety issue, or there's a distance issue to where that is not actually an amenable space for these young people to play basketball in the same way. So I would be in favor of the amendment to the work plan myself. Any other discussion?
So when these portables are finally removed, the plan is to reinstate the basketball hoops eventually? Or is there a different plan? So we don't know.
I don't
School
know. District.
It's a school district.
And that
But that's not something that has ever been discussed?
None of this, none of this was discussed. Well, we heard from one of the public people, the public, that they talked to the high school principal, who said it would be a minimum 2, potentially 4 years. It's after the seismic retrofits. Basically, they're just going to swap out the students from, Ocean View to Marin is next, I guess.
Yeah.
So you can imagine with construction delay, who knows, minimum 4 years. So, yeah.
But so we don't have any guarantee that after that period that there would be basketball courts.
Yeah, that's a good
back
question.
in this location. Okay, that was.
Yeah, I don't know. Mm-hmm.
I would like to know the answer to that, or have some sort of ability to discuss with the school district what their plans are for this.
Well, again, if you put that on your work plan, then you can start doing the research and, yeah.
One thing that Commissioner Noble mentioned last time, which I totally agree with, is it just takes us a long time to it was going to, we wanted to vote on the amendment to the work plan last time, and now we had to wait till this time. I'm glad we can vote it on this time, but, if we want to get to researching, it's and then we have to wait for city council to approve, and then we're going to have to bring it back, and then we have to, so I'm wondering if we could create a motion where we say upon, approval by city council, assuming approval by city council, we would establish a work or a sort of subcommittee to investigate this and decide on that now, so that we don't have to wait till the next meeting to then vote on that. And do you see what I'm saying? I don't know if you guys would be open to that idea.
As long
But
as
the
that
city
fits in the
council is
process.
meeting twice before your next meeting, so there is time to write a letter. If you wanted to designate somebody to write a letter on behalf of, to do the amendment, sorry, on behalf of the commission, then it could be submitted to council and put on an agenda, either, depending on how quickly you could turn it around, it could be January 21st or February 3rd. So those two meetings are before your next meeting.
No, I know, but then we have to wait for our next meeting to hear back, and then we would decide on the subcommittee. I'm just thinking if we wanted to work on it sooner than that, we could, because we already waited a month to take this vote.
So if we move and vote to amend the work plan and submit that to city council, what you're suggesting is that we have a motion that also says, and put it on a future agenda item for the next meeting, wherein there'd be a subcommittee that could begin work on it if pending approval.
I mean, could we have on the agenda, like, assuming that city council approves, then these people would be the subcommittee that can then work on it. So basically, you're just waiting for the consent of city council, and which you can just track by the minutes, and then that group of people can start working on it.
So I'm a little confused about the process to request the amendment to the work plan. So we have the forms on the dais, and can we give the direction tonight that is sufficient for staff to complete this form to take to the council at their next meeting?
Well, at this point, I think it would be, the best approach would be for the commission to designate one of you to fill out the form and send it to me, and I will make sure that it gets on a future agenda of the council.
I don't mind being that person to.
Wonderful.
I don't mind you being that person. That's great.
And then, and if we could, Isabel, it'd be great if we could, I can turn this around so we can try to get it on the next agenda if possible.
And then also I did want to reiterate the 2x2x2. And so does anybody know who you contact if you want to, so the public might want to reach out to people to get on that agenda. I think it's only quarterly meetings. And so unfortunately, they're having one on Monday. And
At 10 a.m.
And it's not on the agenda.
I'm not sure they take public comment there. I think you can observe the meeting, but I don't think it's really, I'm not sure, but.
Yeah, the agenda doesn't say public comment.
Yeah, it's
It is
not that
open-
sort of
It's open to
meeting.
the public.
It is open to the public, but it's not.
So then the question would be, who do people reach out to? Because that's one of the few places I know of where the city and the school district actually sit down and try to hash things out. And that's what's needed here, because we're on one side of the fence, the school district's on the other fence. People are pointing fingers at each other.
Can you actually have a public meeting under the Brown Act and not have public comment?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Public comment has been accepted at the 2x2x2 in the past. So if there were members of the public, comments would be heard.
Very good.
Do you know who any of the interested public would contact if they wanted to get on an agenda or to reach out to?
Well, they can just come to the meeting and speak on.
Say they wanted to have some input in on the next agenda.
Well, just the fact that you're mentioning it, I will make a note of it to make sure that it is on the next agenda. Yes.
And they could go to the meeting on Monday and speak during public comment.
Yes.
Open comment.
Okay, and you'll try to get it on the next 2x2x2 agenda?
Right.
Okay, great.
Another question I have that we spoke about a little bit, Isabel, when we had our existing subcommittee meetings, was I just wanted to understand like how when we add this to our work plan and create a subcommittee, how that works with city staff and you taking on like helping us with research and kind of helping us prioritize and understand what's happened and how to move forward. Is that something that like you and your department has the capacity for, and is that something that needs to be included? Because it talks about, how we'll be able to add this to our workload. How does that impact your workload, and can you accommodate it?
Right. That still needs to be defined. It depends on what the commission is, decides they want to do or find as a solution. It's all going to be it's going to be based on the next steps, and what comes out of the subcommittee. But definitely, there will be staff support, as there is for all of your work plan items.
Is there a reason why we think that this issue requires a subcommittee rather than something that can just be addressed by the full commission?
I think, go ahead.
This is a big lift. This is doing some research, coming up with some options, coming up with some plans. I don't think this is something that would lend itself well to just discussion during a meeting.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, can we discuss in a little more detail what we envision the subcommittee doing before we ask Julia to prepare a work plan request for that subcommittee?
Some of the things that I would imagine the subcommittee doing on this item include researching alternate potential locations for basketball, gathering more public information about the needs of people who've been playing in this location, maybe liaising with the city staff about options, or perhaps speaking with the school about options on that front. Those are some of the things that I would imagine the people on the subcommittee doing to kind of help advance the work, but perhaps others have different thoughts.
I think that's exactly right. I think also just coordinating with the school district or the school if needed, and just hearing about any impacts, positive and negative, of this happening. So, and looking at options, because just to maybe, who knows what some of those options might be. Yeah.
So it seems to me that the issue is that we've lost the basketball courts at Memorial Park, and we want to replace them at Memorial Park temporarily until the previously removed basketball courts are replaced.
If they are.
If they are, and I think there's some concern that since we have no guarantees on that, and since clearly there's greater purview on the part of the school district to decide about this land, it's been my experience, once you go portable, you almost never go back. It's what my learnings have been in the state of Texas, is that once schools start taking playground and playfield land to expand school buildings, it's very difficult to. Now, they have a plan, and they have a sort of time-limited plan for the retrofitting, and so I want to be optimistic, but I think we should all be aware that there's no guarantee this would turn back into basketball.
Something that I just want to ask, so we'll need a motion then to approve the amendment, but do we need to take writing a letter off the table? Can we do that concurrently with doing this? Because I do think, one of the things I would envision the letter saying is a lot of what we've just talked about, about the public process and how we weren't included, and basically our, intended plan for how we want to move forward and some of these concerns. I think that doing that might be a nice way to open the door for the subcommittee to work on it. And it doesn't necessarily have to happen during the next month, but it does seem like until our subcommittee gets approved, even if it's just a few weeks, that might be something that somebody could work on sooner.
I agree. I think we can do both. I don't think, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you finish asking your questions or what you wanted to say, Ben?
I'm not convinced that this issue needs a subcommittee. I think we've heard from the public that there is a desire to reinstate basketball courts at Memorial Park. I don't see any location other than Memorial Park that serves the immediate area. I don't think there's any need to explore alternative locations. I don't think that there's any opportunity to fit basketball facilities on any part of school property at the high school. So I think the issue is really sort of looking for opportunities to add basketball facilities at Memorial Park, which seems to me to be a relatively straightforward exercise. Staff can advise us on those opportunities. They can be presented. We can consider them and take public feedback, and then make a recommendation to the city council. I'm hesitant to form a new subcommittee that could generate a considerable amount of work for commissioners as well as staff if it's not really necessary.
So you're saying change the work plan request to
right.
Just
the work plan would
search,
the work plan would be for the commission to study opportunities to add basketball facilities at Memorial Park and make a recommendation to the city council on that.
Yeah, I think that was consistent, though, right? Is that different from what you guys understood?
Well, the only thing, he's not adding the part about making a subcommittee that could then start working right away, because he's suggesting that perhaps we don't need a whole subcommittee. So it sounds like there's fairly good consensus about amending the work plan, and it's just a
Sure.
matter of whether or not there's agreement about needing a subcommittee for that work.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, the way, I think Shelley had asked us to do subcommittee work is to lighten the staff load, because staff doesn't have huge amounts of time. So I would be happy to support Isabel on this, or if somebody else is too, just so there's not as much legwork to be done. I don't know how you feel, but it's just, we did a tremendous amount of work for that dog subcommittee that I don't think if Shelley had it on her plate, it might have just taken a lot longer. So
I know there's some what's the word I want to use? Realignment happening around what subcommittees are tasked with, what they do. Isabel, in your view, is this a topic that you would feel as a staff member would be an appropriate one for a subcommittee, or do you feel that that's out of alignment with sort of the pace and the sort of focus of where the resources are?
Well, you have the staff recommendation, which was to write a letter. So, anything beyond that, I will have to assess as this item moves forward. Of course, if the commission takes on the looking into the feasibility of putting courts at Memorial Park, depending on how extensive that research is, it's all going to depend. And then, just to think about Memorial Park in itself, there's no cemented area. There's no asphalt anywhere. So if you were thinking of taking part of the green area, that now you're thinking about a CIP project. So it's not going to happen right away. There's no funding for it. So I'm not quite sure where else at Memorial Park the courts could go. I think if there is going to be a mitigation of the loss of the basketball hoops, it would be pretty minimal at this point. If it's at Memorial Park, it would have to be pretty minimal if you wanted it to happen quickly. But anything above, if then it requires, different usage of some of the areas of the park, then you're starting a different process, which will probably be a lengthy.
Yeah, I think that's all the more reason not to request the formation of a subcommittee. I would like for us to discuss this possibility a little bit more before sort of investing a lot of time in pursuing something that's not even possible at all.
And I actually think this is an excellent argument for having a subcommittee, because we're about ready to just dismiss it out of hand. It's not possible, it's too expensive, and we don't know. I'm looking at Key Route. There's a Key Route median right there that's got a lot of space there. Maybe that's an option. We haven't looked at it. So I think that the mistake we would make by not having a subcommittee is having a 30-minute discussion and figuring we've talked it all through, and we haven't. That's why I think there's a good reason to have a subcommittee.
And I think also I would say is if maybe we have that, if we don't have anybody who's interested in being part of the subcommittee, maybe then we say, okay, let's talk about it as a group. And I don't think the subcommittee would ever be opposed to, discussing as a group anything that we find. It's just a way to kind of get more done, I think, and having a deeper delve into it than the half an hour.
I think one of the issues that we're kind of skirting is who is responsible for figuring out how to solve this problem? These were something that were for the whole community, but on school property. Right? And so I think what the staff recommendation to us was somehow trying to figure out a way to force Albany School District to solve this problem. Hopefully in collaboration with us, but part of what I'm hearing is, us trying to figure out how to take other areas of Memorial Park and reappropriate them for basketball, which may well be the solution. I feel like if Albany School District cannot figure out a way to bring back this public resource. So I definitely want to see them try and take the first step and the first swipe at doing this. That might take a while, but are in tandem with us doing this. But I just think the onus should be on them to mitigate for this loss.
I'm really concerned about putting it in their lap. They have no incentive, unless
they're not going to do anything.
Yeah.
They clearly didn't have any public input into this plan, because if so, some of these folks wouldn't have been, I'm sorry, we've already had the public comment part of this.
I know, but you brought up a bunch of concerns, and I have the solution.
But I'm sorry, but right now we have to be on the discussion portion, so.
I understand that.
Okay.
But at this point, you could open the public hearing again and take one testimony, and your problem solved, because I know how to solve it.
I want to go ahead and let the kind of commission discussion go forward. I think there's a concern. We'll be happy to hear your input in another venue, but I think in this particular situation, the school district didn't, either they consulted with the city and we weren't consulted as a part of that conversation, or they sort of made the plan around that. Without consulting about this.
So you would say that you wouldn't even want to request that?
Oh, no, I think we should send the letter. I just feel like just sending the letter is equivalent to putting it in a black hole.
I don't want us to just send the letter. I think we should also take on this as part of our work plan, but I think that a major part of it needs to be trying to work with them. You know, maybe because of this, they need to help fund it if it is going to be expensive, right? I'm maybe that's something that is
I agree with that
already. I guess I'm just not hearing that. Like, as we discuss what a subcommittee would do, it all seems like work that we and the city of, the staff of the recreation department would take on. And I think some of that should be shifted to the Albany School District, given that they made this decision without input from the public or this commission.
Yeah, I know, but I just think we're the commission that's hearing the public comments, and so I think we have this, and it was on city property, so I just feel like we have this obligation now to look into it.
I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm just going to make a motion, and then if folks feel that we haven't had enough discussion, we can certainly go back to that. But it sounds like there's consensus that we should send a letter to the school district aligned with the staff recommendation, and also that there's consensus that we want to request an amendment to our work plan that Julia has kindly agreed to fill out the form and get that back to Isabel. So I'm going to move that we make the amendment to the work plan with the language that Ben used, which was about looking for alternatives at or near Memorial Park to exploring that to provide basketball opportunities, and not including the language about the subcommittee, and also including as a part of that motion that we would send a letter to the Albany School District. So that's what motion is on the table now, and I want to ask if there's any second to that motion.
I'll second.
Everyone in favor of that motion? Anyone opposed?
Yeah, I mean, I think, are we saying, is the motion saying we're not going to create a subcommittee? Because I think.
Just saying it's separating that from the.
So I'll vote for it then.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not saying there would never be one, it's just saying that as a part of the motion, we're filling this out, we're sending the letter, and that gets the ball rolling with the city council. Yeah, sure. And it sounds like this should be an agenda item for next month's meeting as well, so if we could note that. Yeah.
And also, I just looked at the 2x2x2 agenda, and there is an item on update to the school district construction and temporary location plan. So I would assume that the removal of basketball courts will be addressed as part of that item. Not explicitly, highlighted as an item, but it is school construction. So
when is that meeting?
it's on Monday at 10 a.m. right here in the City Council chambers. No. And because it is a public meeting, public comments will be heard. So.
And I also just want to offer that any members of the public that have additional comments on this item, we will be talking about it next month. So you're welcome to submit that in any kind of writing or official way so that we can make that available to people and so that it can be heard by members of the public. But I just want to keep us on our agenda for this evening because we have a lot of people waiting to speak to a future agenda item.
So is there a motion, is there a way to have the motion, and people can vote no or yes, but to still establish a subcommittee that we then, upon approval by city council, can get going on?
And is there a second for that motion?
I would say that I'm comfortable waiting to see if we need a subcommittee. I don't think there's anything preventing us from looking when council approves it. We could go home and start looking now. I mean, we're not beholden to that. So
yeah, okay.
Staff can't devote time to it, but we can.
Okay, as commissioners, we can.
As commissioners.
Okay, good. Okay.
Citizens.
Sure. Okay.
So then we won't advance that motion, or we will advance?
Yeah, that's fine. I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so for now, we'll go with the motion that we've passed, and we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the pickleball. And I want to thank everyone who's been patiently waiting. I know this meeting went a little longer than we thought to get to that item. So this item is item number 6.4. It's Ocean View Tennis Courts and Pickleball. And this is an item that we had at our, I believe, October meeting. I think it was the October meeting. And we are revisiting it now at our January meeting. And there have been a number of comments received. So I just want to mention that. They're included in the packet, and the commissioners should have received those as well to their emails. Okay. This item does not have a formal presentation, but it is an opportunity for us to talk about the next steps and directions on this item. We have heard a lot from members of the public about it, kind of on both sides of the issue, and I just wanted to open it up, I think first to public comment.
Well,
unless I'm misunderstanding the way that it's structured.
Perplexed. What is this agenda item, and what are we being asked to do?
So I think there was concern at the last meeting that this is a big agenda item and that perhaps it needs a subcommittee. So it's kind of along the same lines of, do we need to have a group of people that can help move this agenda item forward more efficiently? Is that the appropriate next step? And perhaps, Isabel, you could share your perspective on this.
So at the last meeting, when we went over all of the work plan of the commission, Commissioner Abbott and Martin did volunteer to be part of the pickleball subcommittee. So what I'm recommending is that the commission discuss, and it seemed like one of the issues was that the commission did not have enough data on the usage of the courts by tennis players. So the subcommittee was formed to try to see if there were any ways that could be employed to gather some of that data.
And I'll just add one other note from the last meeting that I think was my comment, but is just also some folks may have formed their opinions more fully subsequent to our initial discussion in October. So it may not be a matter that those people need, anyway, there may be some people whose opinions have evolved as they've observed either usage of courts or have had a chance to read and reflect more. So we just wanted to kind of revisit this and get a sense of the direction for the subcommittee.
So the commission is going to make a decision on how to proceed.
So Brian and I met, and we have some things to report.
Wonderful.
And then a suggestion for the next steps. That's what we see this item being.
Perfect.
Okay.
And so I can present that, or we can accept comment first.
Why don't you present, should we have you present that, and then we'll open it up for comment?
So we met and we discussed, and basically what we realized is that we don't think there's any way to get high-quality data on casual tennis use. I mean, there's just too many variables involved. There's no reliable way to get a data that we felt would be as high quality as we have for the pickleball players, which is very high quality, or relatively high quality. So, but we do think that there are, we think that's only part of the decision, though. We think that there's other factors involved. But we also think that a lot of the uncertainty we've had is just because we've been bombarded. We've had so much feedback, and there's so many things we're trying to evaluate, that we like the idea of maybe Brian and I meeting with just a small group of the pickleball representatives, maybe 5, maybe fewer, and just having a discussion about it so that we can better understand what is being asked and why they're asking what they're asking. What I will say is that all the feedback we've gotten is pickleball's great. I have not heard yet why it is important that there be permanent courts other than pickleball's great. So that's kind of what we want to hear about. So maybe we'll hear some of that now in public comment, but we want to have a discussion so we can better understand how to evaluate the request.
And then would you be meeting also with a small group of the tennis players?
If needed. I think that, after our meeting with the pickleball players, we could try to contact some of the tennis players if they felt like if they wanted to have input as well. But I think I have a better idea well, yes, we could. We could. Yeah, that is part of our recommendation.
So when pickleball players have come in and discussed the fact that the tennis court nets are not appropriate for playing pickleball because it doesn't allow passing around, or that having the lines on the court is distracting for both tennis players and pickleball players, you would characterize that as pickleball is great? Because to me, that is an argument for why permanent courts are required.
Well, the tennis net is irrelevant because we could restripe it and it wouldn't involve, the other is an issue, the other is a question.
Sorry, which part is it? Because the net is not the right height or size, and so they can't play around.
The way, well, I mean, there's many options, but the options are saying.
I just feel like the way you've characterized the comments that have been brought to us, I don't think are reflective of the nature of the comments that have been brought. I think there have been comprehensive arguments for why permanent pickleball courts are required, including the orientation of the courts. Right, I wasn't here for the meeting and obviously should be watching other ones. So I was surprised that a subcommittee was even formed on this. I thought that this would be coming back to us more quickly to actually go forward with the decision. I felt like the information that we have been receiving is pretty high quality and that there are pretty clear options on the table.
So I would say that there is an option. I guess we've moved to discussion. Maybe we just need to.
No, I'm sorry. I thought it was
sorry.
just a question that I had, like just trying
clarifying
to understand what you clarified.
So if there's no reason that we couldn't get 8 pickleball courts on there and maintain the tennis nets.
There's no reason why that is not
They
possible.
couldn't.
Okay.
Now they're temporary, so that's the question.
Okay.
They're not the full-time permanent ones, but you can lay out 8 pickleball courts there without removing the tennis courts, tennis nets. So that's part of it. So anyway, that's.
So yeah. I don't have more clarifying questions.
So I think I'm sorry, did you have more?
And the one other thing I would say is that the reason I didn't feel comfortable coming with actual suggestions today is because I thought that the agenda item was not well.
Yeah, the agenda item is extremely narrow.
And I didn't feel like it would bring enough interest from concerned parties.
It's specifically on ways to gather data on the use of tennis courts. And so, then we didn't feel like it was the correct meeting for bringing forward other kinds of decisions.
Okay, I think this is probably the appropriate time to open up this section of the meeting for public comment. So if you filled out a comment card, wonderful, and if you haven't, you're welcome to line up along the wall, and anyone that would like to make a comment, we would like to hear from you. And I also just want to say, in the interest of time, that if you agree with what the person at the podium is saying, you're welcome to raise your hand, and we will be able to weigh that as additional sort of vocal support for that point. So thank you, and I do think Isabel has cards. So
I do have 4 comment cards. So first is Kisbar? I'm not sure. Kisho? Okay.
There we go.
Sorry about that. Yes, okay. If you want to come up to the podium. And also Theo? Okay. Sam and Michael Cross.
all right, our first speaker, please step on up to the podium and just tell us your name, and we'd love to hear from you.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy, and thanks for the opportunity to speak about Ocean View tennis courts. I just wanted to let you know that, like 8 months ago, I met with a friend and I said, why don't we play tennis? And everybody lives very close to Ocean View. So we created a, WhatsApp group to play tennis. And now there are 16 families who play tennis every Saturday and Sunday in the morning from 7 to 9 a.m., which we don't even officially reserve the court, but we come and play. Later on, our kids started playing. So now there are almost 70 to 80 people. Not everybody shows up exactly at the same time. They come and play and meet and go. That's what happens every Saturday and Sunday. So I just heard that it's going to be converted into pickleball court permanently. So, and as soon as my daughter heard, she started crying. And literally, you would not believe, almost 3 nights before she goes to bed, she says, "Daddy, are we not going to play tennis now? Can I not walk to that place and go and play there?" So I said, no, we will be playing the tennis. So that's what I thought, I'll come over here and tell you how kids love it. They love the tennis court. At the same time, they love, and for us also, it's easy to watch the kids because it's very close to the park. So while playing, we can watch them. And the other thing is that because the court is in such a way that we train the kids as well there. I mean, so then in the group, there are elders who train the kids there, and we took some pictures and everybody liked it. They bring their kids. So it's a very good place to, meet with the friends and play the tennis there. So I would appreciate if you guys can, consider keeping this as a tennis court. And pickleball team is always welcome to play. We can share the court, but converting into one type of sport, it would be, not good for my kids and for other people as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Teo. I am a student at AMS, and I play tennis about 4 times a week, twice at Memorial Court and twice at Ocean View. And I just like to say that I play a lot, and tennis has changed my life quite a bit, and it would be really sad to see them go. Also, a follow-up thing is the lines never seem to bother me when I play tennis, so the pickleball lines never seem to bother me when I play tennis. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I gathered some Ocean View tennis players, and did you guys get a copy of it? Or I just want to make sure you have a copy of it. I emailed it to you. A lot of those people are families, and when I got back from vacation on January 1st, I started gathering that. If it was a different season, and if I had more time, that list would be 3 times as long, because during the weekends on sunny days, the Ocean View courts are being used by tennis players. And I tried to let you guys know that by emailing you guys when I was there. And oftentimes when we go and play, there'll be tennis players there, and we'll just have to go for plan B, which is hitting on the Ocean View school ground wall. I also wanted to remind the commission that in a couple of weeks, there's going to be 300 elementary school kids at Memorial going there and back, and also looking for places to play. So we need to think about continuing to share space and not take space away from groups of people. You can see what happens when you take space away from people. They get upset. And so I think that the pickleball courts shared between tennis, or the Ocean View courts being shared by tennis and pickleball is great. We are a small city. I think that's great that the pickleball community is growing and they're able to open up courts in El Cerrito and Berkeley. That's awesome. They're bigger cities, but we're Albany, we're small, we need to continue to share. So I don't think it's a good idea to recommend taking tennis courts away, especially at a time when our kids are having to share schools and having to share more space. And you will be hearing from parents about their concerns about play space when they see what kind of play space that they have when they go to Ocean View, or when they go to the high school. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for your time tonight. My name is Michael Cross. I live at 934 Jackson, so that side of San Pablo. Bought our house there in 2010. A tennis player since 5 years old, played high school, college intramural. First 5 years here, I played there about once a week. I had 2 young kids the last 5 years. They're now 5 and 3. They're finally old enough to play tennis. I've started taking the older one there. We've started to hit. So personally, I'd love it if we kept it shared, so we could play tennis there. You know, with the Ocean View School also coming down soon and that transition happening, it would be great to keep the tennis courts as something that's going to continue to be there. So we've already given up on being able to, you know, walk down the street to Ocean View, so for the school. So that's just my opinion. I think Theo made a great point. I mean, I've been playing tennis since I was a kid, so the pickleball lines don't bother me at all when I play tennis. But I just think it would be great if we could continue to share that space. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. My name is Philip Moss. A couple quick comments and then some longer ones. I understand that losing something is difficult in this city, but then we put in perspective, there are 17 tennis courts right now within a half-mile radius of Albany. There are 2, we converted 4 courts into Cedar Rose. Those courts are always packed. Why are they packed? They're permanent courts. Sharing courts, I hear, at Ocean View is like a 20-80 split because you have to have expensive temporary nets to put up to use them. It's very difficult to use the tennis nets. They're not the right height. They take a lot of adjustments. The lines are not correctly on them. When you're running back, the tennis nets are there, so you have to be careful about overrunning the back. So it's very tight when you have to put up temporary nets there. And, you know, they're a big investment for a pickleball player to haul out their net and put it up every time. So that's why we're looking at trying to get some permanent courts here. It's not a matter of we're taking all the tennis courts away. There's going to be 15 tennis courts within a half-mile radius. I figure a half-mile radius is an easy bike ride in the city of Albany. So what also makes Ocean View very important to us, and we're running into this problem at Cedar Rose, is we're getting complaints from the neighbors that live near there about the noise. So we're very limited on the hours we can play there. And they're already filing complaints with the Park and Rec in the city of Berkeley. What's good about Ocean View is there's no neighbors. And also I'd like to add that there's programs being developed that the after-school program is picking up pickleball now. It's great for the elementary school because you can get more students on the courts to play at PE with the permanent courts and the permanent lines. So it's easier to control. There's after school, there's during school. So there's a lot of benefits to doing this. We looked all over Albany. I personally looked. In fact, that's where I came up with the solution to the basketball courts because I know exactly where to put them because that's where I wanted to put pickleball courts at Memorial Park. And we were told, no, we're not going to take anything away from Memorial Park. We had a perfect place to put 4 pickleball courts over there. And then if we were able to do it, that would have solved a lot of the problems. The other reasons why the 8 courts are kind of precious to the pickleball community is we can run tournaments out of it on weekends and raise money for school programs, for other programs that benefit the city of Albany. It's just not benefiting the pickleball. It can benefit park improvements, such. Just in conclusion, I'd like to say that I understand it's hard to give up stuff. I understand it's easy to walk, but this is a small community. I think that we need to look at compromise and more facilities for the older community. You should see the number of seniors that are playing at the senior center now. So it's a benefit to young and old.
Thank you for your comments. You can raise your hand if you agree. Yeah. Thank you for that. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Bill Pounding. The previous speaker made a number of points that I think are very good, that I agree with. I recognize that over time, cities and park districts evolve. When tennis courts were widely built in communities like Albany and all over the country, pickleball didn't exist. So now there's this growing population of people that want to play this sport who don't have facilities to play it. It's a shame that there isn't the money and the land to create new venues. There are places in the country, apparently all over Arizona and Florida, where they have money and land to create dedicated courts. We don't have that luxury. So over time, resources need to be analyzed to see whether they can be used differently, whether they need to be maintained, whether they need to be changed. And finally, you've received, any number of emails with a lot of reasons why dedicated pickleball courts would be a good investment for the city of Albany. And yes, it would take away 2 tennis courts, but there are lots and lots of opportunities for tennis players to play on dedicated tennis courts in Albany and in the surrounding communities. So I think it's a matter of balancing and equity. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to meet with any of you, along with a few other people, if you'd like me to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deborah Bernhardt. I'm an Albany resident, and I want to say this as diplomatically as possible, but I really don't appreciate one of the comments that were made about all that was heard is that pickleball is great. I want that to be stood corrected, that we have been coming to meetings since February. I don't know how many meetings we've been to, and Kathy Teruskin and Bill and myself and a couple of others have given data after data after data, information after information, and it really upsets me to hear that all I've heard is pickleball is great. And I would like to be on the committee of the people that would come to talk to you, because I've been coming to the meeting since February, and we have lots of information that maybe you could go back and look at, the recordings. I'm very upset.
Thank you for your comments.
I'm Jack Wolf. I'm a longtime Albany resident and play pickleball a lot. The thing, I was here at the last meeting, one thing that I think that maybe the committee doesn't understand, although some of the members I think do, is it's an exponential difference in the number of people being served if you put in these pickleball courts. We have pickleball, you play 4 people on a court, you play 15 minutes, you've completed a game, you switch, either you all 4 leave if there are 4 people waiting, or the 2 winners stay on and split up and take on new partners. So at tennis courts, you have 2 courts over an hour. Usually you have 2 people playing. You don't usually play doubles like pickleball. So in an hour, you have 4 people in tennis, each played a set maybe, 2 sets. With pickleball, if we have 7 courts, which is what we're proposing with the dedicated courts, each of those courts, each of the 7, is going to turn over probably 3 or 4 times. And so you've got 7 times 4. You're getting close to 100 people versus 4 with tennis. That's a huge difference. Now, granted, people gave emotional talks about how great tennis is. They brought their kids. Hey, I taught kids from 1st to 5th grade at El Cerrito Madera School last fall. So there are kids that play pickleball too. I've seen lots of kids come to the Cedar Rose courts. When they know the courts are there, they want to play. So kids can play pickleball too. But there's a huge senior community that wants to play that needs courts. Now, in Walnut Creek, they had 4 courts. 8. Well, they had 4, and then they put in 4 more. So you think, well, so now they've got a huge number of courts. It's real easy to go over there and play. No, what's happened is people said, wow, let's all go to Walnut Creek and play. So they're busier than ever. And that's what would happen here, because we had a very busy group playing on the Ocean View courts, and that was when we had to set up nets like we still do. But if we had dedicated courts, even more people would come, and people already have learned more about the sport from the Cedar Rose courts and want to play. So I hope you appreciate that it's a matter of serving more people by putting in the courts. You can serve 4 people or 5 people with the tennis courts, or you can serve 100. They're your community members that are voting residents, and also people from other places. But it's like we're taking away a couple of tennis courts, but there are lots of other tennis courts around, and they just have to go a half mile or a mile. We have to go to Walnut Creek, or we have to go to Alameda, unless we go to Berkeley. So, and Berkeley only has 4 courts. So anyway, that's what I'd like you to understand, is the much larger community that needs to be served, that's ready to play if the courts are available.
Thank you for your comments.
Hello, my name is Kathy Teruskin. I don't envy you being in this position because you're not going to please everybody. I was really happy to hear about the families that play there on weekends. We didn't know about that group before, but they will have other courts they could go to, or they could learn pickleball, which is a fabulous family sport. But I just want to get back to some of the overwhelming comments you've received, because I've been tracking them. You've received 160 pro pickleball comments since we started writing in September. I think you have 26 from the tennis players. Of the 26 tennis players who wrote, many of them were not very specific about how frequently they played. I think only 3 said they played at Ocean View more than once a week. So they play, I think they play at other places and they want to keep Ocean View as an option, but they're not as consistently playing at Ocean View as our group would be. Many of our people who wrote you letters said that they play 4 to 10 times a week, and that's not an exaggeration. So even if our population were smaller, we would be using the facilities more frequently because we just go play. I play 2 hours a day. I want to address the idea of our being an aging population. I can't play other sports. Pickleball is basically my only other option. All of the people who play tennis might not want to play pickleball, but they could. But pickleball players many of them are tennis players who are no longer able to play tennis. And so pickleball is that last option on their lifespan that is available to them. And frankly, some of us are getting older and weaker, and we don't have years and years to wait for these courts. We really, So I guess that it's just the number of people you're serving. The other question, the point that people have made, just keep them dual striped, line them for 8 courts, use 8 portable nets, but keep the tennis courts up there. I think I sent to the commission a diagram of what it would look like to have 2 tennis courts with 8 pickleball courts overlaying it. It's a disaster. I don't think any of us would go. Don't even think of that option. It's just, especially when we have the option of Cedar Rose being these perfect, pristine, new pickleball courts, we will go and wait in line at Cedar Rose rather than have to come to Ocean View, set up our, remember the combination to the box, set up the nets, figure out, which lines to pay attention to and so on. I think no tennis players would play on a multi-striped court, and I can send you that picture again, and I'd be glad to be on a committee to talk about it further.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other remaining public comments on this topic before we bring it back for discussion? And in the interest of time, I am going to ask that we don't have duplicate comments, just because we have so many people commenting. Since both of you have already commented on this topic, I think we'll just, unless others feel differently, but I think just in the interest of time, you're welcome to submit anything in writing. I do want to make sure that members of the public saw this document, which was circulated to members of the commission, which was some data about tennis use at Ocean View Park that was
I think it's
collected.
in the agenda packet, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the emails?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I don't think...
It actually, what it is, it's the email that it came with is there, but because this is a live document, Google document, we were not able to provide...
Because I didn't see this before.
Well,
tonight.
it's in the email that you received. There's a link
Okay,
to
I guess I
it,
didn't-
but
it
as
didn't
part
open
of
on
the
mine.
emails received, we couldn't put the live link into the PDF.
If any member of the public wants to get this and didn't have access to it, I'm sure that the city staff can help us make sure that you have access to this document.
City can copy and paste too.
I think we just need to move, I'm so sorry, but I think we need to move back to discussion, but anybody can submit anything in writing and to amend, to, add to the conversation from this evening. But I just need to be mindful of sort of the public process.
So I just want to contextualize these because I think there's a comment made about the number of pickleball court comments versus the tennis court. So I think if the 26th this isn't just representative of what I've seen over email. So just to make that clear, right? That
There are additional emails
There's
that we've
additional
been
emails from
receiving.
tennis court players that came through that may not be represented in on these pages.
So I have some questions for the subcommittee, since that's what this topic is on, right? The agenda item. Okay. First, are you as a subcommittee going to create a kind of overview of what the subcommittee is going over, or was that discussed at the last meeting? Because I'd be interested to know all the components and the plan for how to move forward. But I have a bunch of questions for you guys, so that's just number one.
Do you want to read?
Well, I think one idea was that that we could come up with various options, A, B, C, D, E, fleshed out for people to consider, so that we're not hashing out everything as a whole group the whole time.
And part of what I was attempting, what I started to produce was kind of a summary of the arguments on both sides. And that's when I went back and looked at all the comments, and I had a really hard time really clarifying why the permanent courts, I heard some things tonight that I hadn't heard before, which is great, why the permanent courts were important rather than some sort of compromise that they remain temporary. But anyway, so trying to summarize, because I come here and we hear 30 people talk, my head's spinning. We couldn't make sense of it. So trying to kind of sit down and just provide that analysis and then make that part of a report that then we could consider.
I don't know if that is necessary, because we do all hear that. I guess so the things that I'm interested in are, for example, how many of the pickleball players live in Albany? Versus how many of the tennis players live in Albany, because that's something that I don't feel like we have data on, and since this is about what you can do to collect more data, I think that that's kind of important information, although I do recognize that people who play pickleball have talked about going out in Albany and benefiting the Albany community, but I think that that's a key thing that we should be considering. I also want to know if the subcommittee is going to look into other options beyond Ocean View, so we've talked about that before, and so just there are different options at Ocean View, and that seems to be a focus, but I think it should move beyond that. For example, somebody brought up this idea of memorial, and so I just think that as we consider this and look for either shared or separate options, that everything is on the table.
That is something we've talked about.
Okay, great. Just making, I just want to better understand what.
No, absolutely. You could join the subcommittee.
Probably won't, but I think it's really, now that I've heard a little bit more, I understand why the subcommittee exists. Again, I think I should start watching all the meetings that I missed, but I do think that sounds great. But I would love to hear at a future meeting, kind of what the, other subcommittees have reported back, kind of the scope of work and how you plan to attack it. And so I would love to get that overview.
I don't know. Oh, Ben, why don't you go ahead?
So I think that since we last met on this subject, we've received a lot of additional information. And the public has had additional opportunity to provide comments to us. So I feel personally like I almost have as much information as I need to make a decision on this. The one thing that I think could be explored further is if Ocean View stays as a dual-use pickleball tennis, are there some enhancements that could be made to that court to make it better for the pickleballers? And that's actually something that could occur with a meeting of the subcommittee and city staff with some of the people from pickleball, and maybe some tennis people there too, to say, look, the commission may decide to keep it dual use, and if that's the decision, could there be some things that would make it a little better for you? Understanding that that's not your preference, but if that's the way it goes, not necessarily saying that is the way it will go, but if that is the way that it goes, are there maybe some things that can be done that can make it better? And I say that with some recent personal experience playing pickleball with my kids. We had so much fun. It was at my in-laws' retirement community where they had one tennis court and one pickleball court side by side. My kids had the option to play tennis or pickleball. They chose pickleball, and they had so much fun. So I definitely understand from firsthand experience the appeal that pickleball has and the appeal that a dedicated pickleball court has for people of all ages. But I think that given the time that we've spent on this subject and the amount of public comment that we've received, the on-site visit that the commission had, the numerous commission meetings that we've had, the amount of time that members of the public have spent coming to these meetings and speaking, I think we have a lot of information. I think that the one piece of information that for me at least is missing is what I mentioned before. Are there some ways, if the courts stay as dual use, that it could be made a little bit better for the pickleballers?
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering for the next, so you guys, I'm just curious about the process for this. You guys are going to maybe, I like this idea of meeting and having a conversation with pickleball representatives, but then would we be talking about the next meeting with some proposals for what to do based on that?
I think that's the idea, unless there's, like, we realize we also need to speak to tennis players or something that delays it. But that is the idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I would say about, I think I really like the idea of understanding the breakdown between Albany pickleball players versus outside of Albany. And the reason why I say that is for the tennis court people that showed up, I think one real advantage for them is they can walk there and their kids are there. And so it's like, and I'm not saying that, and I also totally see the advantage of dedicated pickleball courts. Like, what a pain in the butt to have to go create that. And that's a total deterrent. So, I mean, my position right now is more shared space, whether that's be, conversion of one tennis court, something like that, if we were going to go that way, because my concern is just taking away all the tennis is really, just taking away a sport for people who are wanting to walk there. And anyway, so that's an area of exploration, I think, because that proximity thing, we're trying to reduce vehicle miles traveled, so, anyway, so that's just my take, is that we should be thinking, and again, pickleball players, if they can drive to Cedar Rose or Walnut Creek, then they can probably drive somewhere else too. They don't have to be in Albany either. So that's just something to consider.
So I just want to, do you want to go ahead, Brian?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's going to be really hard to get actual data on where everybody's from. I do know, and from the dog park subcommittee, that was a Herculean effort to try to go door to door. Well, because we know where those people are, but to go to the actual dog park and interview everybody and find out where everybody's from. So I honestly don't think that's going to happen unless it's self-reported. I do know the people from the senior center have said that there's been a lot of training there, so there's a lot of people who are local who have been trained on it. One thing I have gotten tonight is a better sense of what it would be. Well, first of all, people expressing a need for play spaces and saying that if we just it became clear to me that having shared spaces means that kids really can't do pickleball on their own. So you couldn't have kids say, hey, let's go to Ocean View and play pickleball. They need to know the combination. They need to go out and get the net set up. We've just cut that completely off if it's a shared space. But if it's a permanent space, then not only are we serving the seniors much better, as we've been hearing, but then it actually becomes an option, which it wasn't an option, for kids just to bring their paddle and their ball. And so I think, so that for me is sort of new information that's sort of solidified, the way I've been thinking about it, that the permanent courts would meet the greatest need. But I think the subcommittee can come back with some concrete options for votes. You think on the next meeting timeline? Yeah.
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
I just want to make a couple comments. I actually agree with Ben's comments that I have, and I think I didn't say it very eloquently at the beginning, but I have had an opportunity since our last meeting to read, reflect, and also I walk every day past the Cedar Rose courts. I've seen at all different times of day those courts full of people playing, and lots of parents with young children as well as seniors, and oftentimes people waiting. I am someone that plays tennis my whole life, and I played pickleball. I never was walking distance to tennis courts, so we always had to drive, but it was in a different kind of community. I think one of the things that's great about this community is that I can walk everywhere. And so I am sensitive to people expressing a desire to be able to walk with their kids to the park, or as their kids get older, for their kids to walk to the park and play tennis or play other sports, or just be able to take part in recreation. So I don't say it lightly if it's like, oh, we'll just go to the other courts at the other park. At the same time, I feel like we are a community that has an aging population. We're a community where recreation opportunities are really important for people, and I do think that the volume of people served by pickleball courts is an important consideration for us to think about. And I say that as someone who's a lifelong tennis player, and I do love tennis, so I feel both sides of this issue, but I do feel that I have enough information now to make, I feel comfortable making a decision based on all of that I've read and thought about. I'm also happy for the subcommittee to come back with some specific options, but I'm sensitive to how much public input, time, meetings, and how long we stretched this out. So I'd love for it to be as efficient as possible a process, with the understanding that there's probably going to be some compromise. Probably all sides will not be equally happy, but the idea in my mind is to help drive us towards something that creates opportunities for all the sports and for all the people, maybe not in every single location, but that we're sort of trying to think about service to the greater community and, or to the community as a whole. And so those are my comments, and I'm eager to hear whatever you all come up with as you sort of reflect and as you have conversation, if we're going to continue on that.
One thing I was hoping you could explore is this need to convert both of the courts. Like, what's the...
That was one of the ideas.
Okay, so that's a big question for me. Why is that required versus, or is it just desirable? So
I have some questions, or just some things that I'm hoping that you can kind of attach to this is maybe just approximate costs of all the different options. I think that would be really useful to help me make a decision. Another thing that I've just been thinking about is, I get that this is something that's come before us, but I think it is like a major change and something that people are obviously passionate about. I don't think we get this many comments on anything, even the dog park, which was surprising, because of all the dog lovers. So like, I definitely want to make sure we do it justice and explore things, but I'm also interested in like other temporary solutions. It sounds like the solution now is kind of working, but that when only one tennis court is in use, then 3 pickleball courts disappear. So part of this is like, and I'm also just interested to see how it function, like having 8 temporary courts. I understand not as desirable, but I just, like, is there some way where we can incrementally get to a place where we better understand things and see how things are working instead of having to make a fully permanent decision? And what would that look like? I know it's not ideal, but sometimes we like to put things into action before making a permanent decision.
Yeah, and I would reiterate that my concern would be is if they're not permanent, then you're pretty much cutting out the younger generation from playing on the courts.
You're reducing discovery, sort of. Yeah, just.
I would have never gone to a tennis court as a child and like set up a tennis net. But I played tennis all the time because it was something you could just walk down there. It was free. We never reserved courts. So I have a lot of sympathy for, both sides of this, both the pickup nature of tennis, but also the fact that having permanent dedicated courts with the right striping and the right nets makes it so much more accessible to so many more people.
But maybe, again, there's a compromise, like Julia said, like maybe there can be 4 permanent courts and 4 not permanent courts. And I feel like it's really important to like look through all the options and really consider, because I feel like there's so many options, including not going to Ocean View, because I personally am very concerned about like the parking around Ocean View and impacting that park if it gets like mobbed with people, because already it can be challenging to go there at certain hours of the day. So I guess I think that it is really important to go through the full process and think through all the different options, so.
And I would just add to that I think exploring the tennis courts at Memorial Park should be a part of that as well. The only reason I mention that is because they have more courts there. I understand that they have 4 courts, which allows them to play high school tournaments, but again, it's a situation of sharing with the school district, and other private schools use those courts, and I don't know that that's necessarily our focus as a city, is serving St. Mary's or other, not to put a finger on any particular school. I'm just saying that I've heard that they have to have 4 courts there because that allows them to play tournaments. But it seems like if we're trying to create equitable distribution of tennis opportunity and also find a place to put pickleball courts, that perhaps someone should also look at that as one of the A through E options.
That could be one of those options. It does seem like a very extreme one because it would have a huge impact on the schools and the students that we're trying to serve the community as well. I think it would be helpful to know from Isabel if there is some sort of memorandum of understanding for the school to use the city facilities at certain times, or some contract there or anything like that.
Well, there is a joint use agreement with the school district.
Okay.
Yes.
So then I was going to say, if you went down that route, then you'd have to talk to the school district, right? Okay.
So does the subcommittee think that the next time we meet as a full commission on this issue, we'll be able to make a decision?
I mean, the plan is.
The plan is to have it short and sweet, option A, B, C, D, E, pro, con, and we then discuss, hopefully decide.
And then it would go to council, recommendation.
And so I'm sure that the subcommittee is working with staff on those options and the analysis of those options.
And the funding, which is what I'm concerned about.
A lot of the funding, I think, is pretty comparable if you're talking about restriping or other things. If you're talking about new construction somewhere, then that's a whole nother ballpark. And I think we could probably rank them in likely order of cheapest to most expensive. That's probably the easiest thing we could do.
So I made a list of the options that seem like they should be on the table. And one is to convert all of Ocean View to pickleball. 2 is to convert one of the tennis courts to pickleball, leave another as tennis. 3 is to keep all tennis. And a variation of 2 and 3 is to add enhancements for pickleball that, while it's not exactly what they would want, at least there's something that makes it a little bit better for them if there's either shared use of both courts or only one pickleball court. And I guess the fifth option would be to explore an alternative location for permanent pickleball such as Memorial Park. I personally think that that fifth option we shouldn't spend time on. But if others disagree, that's certainly something that could be on the table. And what I would hope is that the subcommittee could work with city staff to flesh out these options with an analysis of the pros and the cons, as well as an assessment of the feasibility and the ability for the city to even do it. What I would hate is for the subcommittee to prepare an option or a recommendation that hasn't been vetted with city staff and isn't aligned with the ability for the city to do it. And so what I would hope is that the subcommittee could work with city staff to clearly identify what those options are and come to the commission the next time this is heard with the information that we need in order to make a decision and a recommendation in the council so we can move this forward.
That is the plan.
That's the plan.
That sounds reasonable, and maybe we could meet with Mark or something and have that be one of our meetings.
Isabel, does that seem reasonable that Mark would be available to take this meeting at this time between now and the next meeting?
I'll have to check in with Mark.
And it doesn't, when this comes back to us, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the next meeting. It's just whenever it's ready.
And then the other thing I would mention is that I think Mark has said that that even just repainting the whole court would be over $25,000 or what, it would trigger a capital improvement project, and so then it would be, I don't know how many months or years before even that would get done. Is that correct?
Well, I wasn't part of the conversation. I mean, there was some conversation at the last meeting, but I'm not privy to all the details, that would be involved in any modifications to Ocean View. But any comprehensive modification will probably trigger the $25,000.
It was estimated around 40 is what I understood.
The full conversion. So then, and it's unfunded at this time, right? There's no funding identified for this. So it's, depending on whether or not, because after you make a recommendation, you're making a recommendation to council, then the item will go to council, will be vetted at that level as well. And I would think that the next step after that, depending on council's decision and your decision, it's a process. So even if it did move forward and there was some sort of conversion, again, then we get into the CIP process, which is another process which I cannot provide any timeline on that.
Now, as far as funding goes, we were told we had hundreds of thousands of dollars of Measure R funding, and we were told that there was some sort of Proposition 68 funding from two different pots that was coming to Albany, and that we would get an update on that in the fall, and we never have. Is that, have you heard anything more about Proposition 68 funding?
The dollar amounts are supposed to come out in late January or February. So I'm on the mailing list, the email list. So as soon as that information comes out, I will be informed, and so is Mark. And the identification of funding will come once the project is approved, because it all depends on the timeline. And at the time that the project is approved, then we will work to find funding for it. But again, all the pieces have to come together.
But that's the process. People should understand that's the kind of the process and the basic timeline.
So in the interest of time and just making sure that we're sort of moving in a direction, I just wanted to sort of do a pulse check here and suggest that does our subcommittee have adequate direction from this group based on this discussion to sort of move forward in exploring those options and preparing them for a subsequent meeting of this commission?
I think so.
I think, yeah, we've got some good information, some good questions, suggestions.
And I want to thank the members of the public for being here to make those comments. And
And I would like to apologize. I didn't mean to be dismissive. There's been very enthusiastic, very high-quality comments, and I have not made a decision on this. I think pickleball is a great thing. I think tennis is a good thing, so it's a really difficult decision. I did not intend to offend anybody. I am very happy to be hearing reasons why the fact that the courts are permanent is significant. That's what I haven't really heard very concretely, and that's why I'm hoping we can meet and maybe so we can understand that even better, so that we're in a better position to make a good decision. That's all I meant to say. Forgive me.
All right, so I think at this time, we'll go ahead and move forward to the next agenda item, which is our second to last one, which is about the Recreation Reserve Fund, which we just briefly talked about, but I wanted to give Isabel a chance to.
Okay, so at the last meeting, the Commission requested more information on the Recreation Reserve Fund. So I've prepared this very brief PowerPoint for your information. The Recreation Reserve Fund purpose is for one-time large purchases that don't necessarily fall into our operating budget. It's also been used for emergencies such as roof repair or some facility enhancements, not enhancements, but basically if there's something that breaks and the cost of repair is beyond what our operating budget can sustain. And then also park and facility projects, when those projects suddenly become, the budget becomes greater than what was budgeted. We will dip into the reserve funds at times to make up for that budget shortfall. One instance recently was the, I believe, the bathrooms at Memorial Park. The revenue for this fund comes for a $4 fee that is included in hourly rental rate for facility rentals, and a $2 fee included in our hourly rate, rental rate for tennis courts, picnic rentals, athletic fields, and block parties. And there's also a $4 fee included in all class registrations, and the facility rental application fee also goes towards that fund, and that is $36.
One quick question, is the $2 fee, doesn't it just cost a few dollars to reserve a tennis court, but it costs like hundreds of dollars for a block party? Is that correct?
I'd have to look again at those numbers. I don't have them in front of me, but that sounds, block parties are not that expensive, I don't think, but yes, it is maybe $8 to $10 fee for hourly rate for tennis courts, but block parties, right now I don't.
I think it's a couple $100s, but they waive it during the National Night Out one in August, so a lot of people have their block parties then.
And I think the block party, that cost goes to like the police for closing off the street, so it doesn't.
I don't know what
delivering the barricades.
It does seem a little bit disproportionate that the $2 that some of the like under $10 fees include this $2 thing, and multi-$100 things are still the same $2. So people might want to relook at that structure.
Right. And other fees are included in our master fee schedule. So we do revise that master fee schedule on a yearly basis, usually at the beginning of the fiscal year. So I'll make
a city council thing?
Yes.
Okay.
As part of the budget process.
So we can make that comment, Brian.
And lastly, the Rec Reserve Fund balance currently has a $93,000 fund balance, and I will be going to council with a request to allocate some funding to update the Parks and Recreation Master Plan in February, and my estimate of the request will probably be about $50,000.
50?
50, yes. Which then will bring down the balance to approximately $43,000.
Are we going to be part of that process, the master plan?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Once the funding is allocated, that it is approved by council, then we'll start the master plan update process.
What is the approximate revenue in a given year? So in other words, as it cycles forward, given the registrations and the rentals, what is the income that comes in on a typical year?
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that.
The only reason I wonder is I'm just thinking in my day job hat, what level of reserves, does the city have a guideline about what levels of reserves need to be in that fund to just in case things come up, in case there's construction over, cost overages?
Yeah, so our finance department is working on a reserve policy for all these different types of reserve funds, and we'll go to council at some point, but there are no clear guidelines at this time.
Okay.
Like how, is there data on how often this fund gets used? Is it like annually, irregularly, kind of multiple times a year?
Well, every time we use it, we have to go to council to seek approval. So again, I didn't go back in history to find that information, but
I mean, it's not, I'm just curious.
Yeah,
Like, if it's a thing that gets used like very often or just kind of infrequently.
I think the bathroom was about 1.5 years ago or
Right.
so, and then we're using it now in 2020 for the master plan,
Yeah,
so.
and I think some of it was used
Big
for the
chunk.
HVAC system as well, the update to the HVAC system at the community center. So it's periodic.
Oh, go ahead.
And you're requesting, was it 50-something or whatever, for what?
The update to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
You mean just to pay someone to revise it?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question I had is that's the end of this PowerPoint?
Yes.
So the other question I had is about any of the additional balances for the various Measure R funding or other allocations that we had understood to still have a balance in them, just wondering if you have any other information on that, because I wasn't clear at the last meeting whether or not what was being said was that actually all of those funds have zeroed out, or if there's still money set aside that's earmarked towards play fields that we are still going to be able to sort of help give guidelines around or guidance around allocations.
Yeah, again, that's information that I can bring at a future meeting.
That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, any other questions or discussion on this item before we move to our final item? Our final item may be one of the most exciting ones of the evening, because this is when we will nominate and elect a new chair and vice chair for this coming year. So at this time, I would love to open up the floor to nominations for a commission chair, and you're welcome to self-nominate as well. And I'm assuming Kirsten did not express an interest in taking an officer's role in her
She did not
email.
mention.
Okay, just wanted to double check. The floor is now open for nominations.
Question, who has served as chair or vice chair already?
I'm the vice chair.
You've been vice.
Sometimes the vice chair, I was the vice chair before I took this role. Sometimes the vice chair moves up to chair. Just putting it out there, there's no requirement for that, but sometimes that
I
happens.
thought it was required. It's not.
Yeah. I think that somebody having been vice chair in the past is a great qualification for being chair.
So anyway, I was going to say, I nominated Harriet last year for chair. I thought she's done a fantastic job. I feel like 1 year is way too short. So I was going to re-nominate Harriet.
Thank you. I'm having a baby this year, and that is all I can take on. So I am not eligible to be a chair of anything. Thank you.
Wow. Well, that's too bad.
And that is on the public record. Sorry. Sorry, honey.
No taking that one.
In that case, I feel like Ben has a lot of great experience working with city councils and commissions, and I nominate him for chair.
I would second that nomination.
He seems overjoyed.
I want to give him an opportunity to
Concerned
decline.
that I haven't been vice chair and therefore don't bring to the position that experience.
In the vice chair role, you mostly serve as the sort of stand-in in meetings when the chair is not there. And for those that aren't familiar, what you mostly do in the chair role is just sort of work on the agenda and obviously help lead the meeting. So I feel like the vice chair role is not necessary to do the chair role. It's just
highly beneficial.
But no, for example,
Ben on this
I've never led a meeting. Harriet has been at every meeting, so I've never actually had to fulfill any of the roles of chair during my short time.
I think you'd be an excellent chair.
Oh gosh,
I do.
I have 2 kids. and work really far away and never make it to meetings on time.
Well, she doesn't.
I personally don't think I should.
Brian, you haven't been chair.
I haven't been either, and
How long have you been on the commission?
Longer than me.
Why? A little bit longer than you.
I don't think he's ever been vice chair, though.
I have not been vice chair, no. I would be happy to be one heartbeat away from the chair.
I'm going to nominate Brian as vice chair and Ben as the chair, and I'm going to allow them to say if they really want to decline or switch.
So other than running the meeting, the responsibility of the chair is to coordinate with staff on the agenda.
Correct. Which can be done in person or over email. Email is usually fine. So it's not a huge time commitment, but obviously Isabel would have her own way of wanting to structure those meetings, but I don't find it to be a super onerous. There are, throughout the year, 1 or 2 usually presentations at city council meetings that either the chair or vice chair could do when we adopt a work plan or when there's some issue, but generally there hasn't been additional time commitment beyond that. It's less onerous than a subcommittee.
Depends on the subcommittee.
Yeah, actually, dog park aside.
Okay. I will not decline.
Okay, and Brian?
I will not decline.
Okay, so at this time, we have 2 nominations on the floor that have not been declined. One is for Ben as the chair. I'd like to ask if there's a second.
I second.
All those in favor?
I did the motion, I can't second.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? Congratulations, Ben. And then for vice chair, we have a nomination on the floor for Brian Martin. And do we have a second?
A second.
All those in favor? Congratulations to our new slate of officers. You're going to get to sit right in the middle. Wow.
Oh, I didn't think about that because the view of the screen from here is very poor.
Yeah, so.
It's all good.
Great, and with that.
Wait, new agenda.
We're going to talk about the future agenda items. I know we already identified one, which was the basketball will be on the next agenda. And we'll wait to hear from the subcommittee about when the future agenda item is around pickleball. Are there any other future agenda items?
Yes, I think that an update on the Albany Hill parcel would be a good agenda item, specifically if anybody is able to go to the informational meeting that it sounds like is at the end of the month, like a staff report or something on that, or any other information that arises between now and our next meeting.
About the development issue that was brought up in the open
Potential development issue, the status of that. I mean, I've been on a lot of emails with outside organizations and things that are also working on it, but I think it would be really interesting to hear kind of what the status of that parcel is with the city and the Planning and Zoning Commission, et cetera.
And then also related to the Albany Hill is the city lost its case in court against the Lions on a 3-judge panel at the Ninth Circuit a few weeks ago. And the Lions, at least one Lions representative has been pointing in public forums to the lower court's recommendation that the city either pay the Lions for the easement that they have, or that the city sell off a decently large chunk of parkland at Albany Hill. So I think that should come before us in some way. I don't know what the right timing would be, but Isabel, if that's something that you could.
I've made note of it, and when it's the right time, we can bring some information to the commission.
Any other future agenda items? All right, with that, I will adjourn our January meeting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.